Imagine a country so small that most people can't even locate it on the world map. Yet it plays a secret role in fueling the cash-driven economy of one of the richest nations on Earth, Japan. Sounds unbelievable, right? How could a developing Himalayan nation, known for Mount Everest and breathtaking landscapes, possibly have anything to do with Japan's sophisticated financial system? But here's the twist. Every time a Japanese citizen withdraws yen from an ATM, pays for coffee in cash, or stores bills in their wallet, a tiny piece of that money's journey traces back to the mountains of Nepal. It is not just tourism or culture connecting these two vastly different countries. It is business, big business. Because Nepal grows a special resource, so rare and valuable, that without it Japan's entire paper currency system would struggle to exist. This is the untold story of how Nepal grows Japan's cash, a story about plants' power and profit that reveals how nature in one of the world's poorest countries fuels the financial machine of one of the world's richest. Welcome back to MN Biz Spark, where we dive deep into the hidden forces driving the global economy. The businesses, industries, and stories most people overlook, but that quietly shape the modern world. In today's episode, we'll uncover a fascinating connection between Nepal's agriculture and Japan's money. Yes, literally, their money. You will learn how a delicate plant from the hills of Nepal became a billion-dollar backbone of Japan's cash production. We'll explore how this trade started, who profits from it, why Japan refuses to give it up even in the age of digital payments, and what it reveals about globalization, sustainability, and the invisible chains of modern business. So sit tight, because what you're about to hear will completely change the way you look at money, and maybe even make you rethink what value really means. For most people, money feels like a symbol of modern civilization, an outcome of banking, economics, and technology. But behind every crisp banknote lies a surprisingly ancient process, one that starts not in a printing press, but in the soil. Japan, one of the world's most technologically advanced countries, is also one of the few that still relies heavily on cash. In fact, despite being home to global digital payment giants, over 40% of transactions in Japan are still made with physical yen notes, and that means Japan needs a lot of paper. Not just any paper, but a very special kind that can withstand folding, moisture, and decades of handling without tearing. Unlike ordinary paper, which is made from wood pulp, Japan's banknotes are made from a natural fiber known as Mitsumata. And here's where Nepal enters the story. The Mitsumata plant, scientifically known as Edgeworthia chrysantha, grows best in high altitudes with rich soil, moderate sunlight, and plenty of rainfall, exactly the kind of conditions found in Nepal's mid-hill regions. Historically, Mitsumata was cultivated in Japan itself, but as the demand for banknote paper grew, the Japanese government realized it needed a more sustainable, cheaper, and climate-stable supply chain. When Nepal, one of Asia's poorest but most biologically diverse nations, became the perfect partner. The story begins in the 1940s and 1950s, when Japan's need for high-quality paper began to exceed its domestic supply. Local production of Mitsumata couldn't keep up, and importing from other countries proved expensive. Nepal, recovering from decades of isolation, was looking for trade opportunities to uplift its rural communities. Japanese paper experts, working with the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, identified Nepal as an ideal location for Mitsumata cultivation. The collaboration kicked off quietly, with small plantations in regions like Dolakha, Sankuasaba, and Ramechhap. Over time, the plant became so central to local livelihoods that entire villages began depending on it. Nepali farmers would plant the shrubs, nurture them for 2 to 3 years, and then harvest the bark, which would later be processed, dried, and exported to Japan. The Japanese paper industry loved it. The quality was superb, the costs were low, and the trade created a win-win situation. But it wasn't just about economics, it was about control. Japan's central bank and its official printing corporation, the National Printing Bureau, built long-term contracts that ensured a steady flow of raw Mitsumata fiber from Nepal. What's fascinating is how this seemingly small trade evolved into a multi-million-dollar ecosystem. Nepal, which exports around 500 to 800 tons of Mitsumata annually, doesn't just send raw materials. It sends the very foundation of Japanese currency security. Banknote paper requires strength, durability, and a specific texture, and Mitsumata provides all three. Its fibers are short but strong, giving yen notes that smooth yet firm feel that resists tearing. Unlike cotton or wood pulp, Mitsumata fibers also contain natural waxes that repel moisture, which is why Japanese yen can survive humidity, rain, or even accidental washing without major damage. But there's another reason Japan loves Mitsumata. It's perfect for anti-counterfeiting technology. The fiber's density and structure make it almost impossible for counterfeiters to replicate the same paper texture with synthetic materials. So, while digital payments grow, Japan continues printing physical cash with an almost obsessive precision, and Nepal's hills quietly sustain that obsession. Now think about the economics of it. A Nepali farmer earns roughly $1 to $1.50 per kilogram of Mitsumata bark. That doesn't sound like much. But for many villages, it's one of the few stable sources of cash income in a largely subsistence-based economy. The plant grows naturally on slopes, preventing soil erosion and supporting biodiversity, making it both profitable and eco-friendly. Meanwhile, by the time that same Mitsumata bark is processed in Japan and turned into banknote paper, its value multiplies by nearly 50 times. Each yen note that passes through Japanese hands carries a hidden trace of Nepali soil, mountain rain, and human labor. Yet most people in Japan, and even in Nepal, have no idea this connection exists. This trade doesn't just represent economic interdependence. It symbolizes how globalization works quietly behind the scenes, linking a rural farmer in Dolaka to a Tokyo banker handling billion-yen transactions. But it hasn't always been smooth. Nepal's Mitsumata trade has faced challenges, from inconsistent yields due to weather changes to smuggling and price manipulation by middlemen. Over the years, many Nepali farmers have complained that they do the hardest part, cultivating and harvesting, while most profits go to traders and exporters. The government has tried to intervene, setting up cooperatives and support programs through the Forest Research and Training Center, but limited infrastructure and lack of modern processing facilities keep the margins low. Meanwhile, Japan has diversified some of its supply by sourcing from India and Bhutan, yet Nepal remains the preferred supplier because of fiber quality. The trade represents an intriguing paradox. Nepal, struggling with poverty and unemployment, plays a vital role in sustaining the currency of a global economic powerhouse. It's a reminder that even in the era of AI and digital finance, the physical foundations of money still depend on natural resources in human hands. Over time, the Mitsumata connection also shaped cultural ties. Japanese agencies began funding educational and agricultural projects in Nepal, training local farmers on sustainable harvesting. In some regions, Mitsumata cultivation even replaced illegal logging and wildlife poaching as a source of livelihood, indirectly protecting Nepal's forests. And for Japan, the relationship offered more than just paper. It offered stability. The yen is one of the most respected and stable currencies in the world, and maintaining that image means maintaining control over every detail, including the paper it's printed on. That's why Japan still imports thousands of tons of raw bark annually, even as it transitions to more digital systems. The central bank keeps its cash reserves secure with physical yen, because culturally, the Japanese people trust tangible value. Cash in Japan isn't just money, it's identity, tradition, and confidence in the system. And at the root of that confidence is a shrub growing silently in the hills of Nepal. But here's the fascinating part. This trade doesn't just benefit Japan and Nepal, it also opens up lessons for the rest of the world. In an era where economies are rapidly digitalizing, Japan's insistence on physical currency, powered by an agricultural product from another country, reveals something profound about resilience and diversification. It shows that even advanced economies depend on small rural producers thousands of miles away. And for Nepal, it's a lesson in hidden opportunity. that sometimes your biggest export isn't a manufactured product or a tech innovation, but something as humble as a plant with the right properties. If properly industrialized, Nepal could multiply its revenue tenfold by building its own processing plants to turn Mitsumata bark into semi-finished pulp, rather than exporting it raw. Experts have long suggested this, arguing that Nepal could move up the value chain, creating jobs, foreign exchange, and stability. Some pilot projects have already begun in eastern Nepal, supported by Japanese aid, to produce high-grade pulp domestically. If scaled up, it could make Nepal a global hub for high-security paper, not just for Japan, but potentially for other countries printing their own banknotes. Yet, this story also exposes the fragility of such interdependence. Climate change threatens to disrupt the delicate balance that makes Mitsumata thrive. Rising temperatures, unpredictable rainfall, and soil degradation are already affecting yields. If the supply chain breaks, Japan would face an unexpected problem: not enough raw material for its money. It is ironic. A modern nation's financial stability depending on the weather patterns of a Himalayan country. And it's not just Japan. Across the world, countries rely on small suppliers for crucial raw materials that underpin massive industries, from lithium in Bolivia to cobalt in Congo. Nepal's Mitsumata is just one example, but it symbolizes a much bigger truth: that global wealth still rests on the labor and landscapes of the developing world. As we dive deeper, we see that Japan has started experimenting with blending Mitsumata with other fibers like abaca and cotton to reduce dependency, but the quality never quite matches. Nepali Mitsumata has a distinct fiber length and texture, giving yen notes their recognizable feel. That's why, even today, Japan continues to invest millions in maintaining its partnership with Nepal. The quiet villages harvesting Mitsumata are unknowingly sustaining a piece of Japan's national identity. The trade represents a perfect loop. Japan provides aid, technology, and markets. Nepal provides the resource, labor, and trust. Together, they sustain a business model built on mutual benefit, though unequal in scale. But as digital money rises and cash circulation slowly declines, what happens to the people who depend on this trade? That's the question looming over Nepal's rural economy. If Japan ever stops using physical banknotes, thousands of Nepali farmers could lose their livelihood. On the other hand, if Nepal leverages this expertise to supply other industries, such as luxury paper, stationery, or security documents, it could future-proof its economy. In essence, this story is a mirror, showing how deeply connected our world is, how invisible economies sustain visible ones, and how small actions in remote corners can ripple through global finance. The Mitsumata plant might seem ordinary, but it represents a delicate balance between nature and money, tradition and innovation, poverty and power. It's not just about Japan's cash or Nepal's exports. It's about the broader truth that economic value is never created in isolation. Every yen in Japan's wallet carries the fingerprint of a Nepali farmer, and every harvest in Nepal sustains the trust of millions in Japan's economy. That is the power of unseen business, and that is what makes this story so extraordinary. Before we wrap up, here is a question for you. Did you ever imagine that something as simple as the paper in your wallet could be rooted in the mountains of another country? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should Nepal industrialize Mitsumata and make its own high-security paper industry? Or should it diversify to prepare for the digital cashless era? Your opinion might spark the next great economic debate. So, what have we learned today? Japan's cash, one of the world's most secure and iconic currencies, is grown in part in Nepal. From the misty hills of Dolakha to the bustling streets of Tokyo, a silent economic partnership thrives, proving that even the smallest nations can have an outsized role in the global economy. This story reminds us that innovation isn't always about technology. Sometimes it's about recognizing hidden value in the natural world. Nepal may not have the financial might of Japan, but it has something just as powerful: resources that the world can't easily replace. And for Japan, this dependency highlights the delicate balance between tradition and modernization. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, hit that like button, subscribe to MN Biz Spark, and turn on notifications. Because every week, We bring you stories that reveal the secret engines of the global economy. From small villages shaping big industries to billion-dollar trends nobody talks about, this is where business meets storytelling. Until next time, remember, behind every note you spend, there's a story worth knowing. And at MN Biz Spark, we make sure you hear it.